Hey, what's going on, guys? We got a special guest here today. We have Brigham Dallas. He's the founder of Hello Sugar. They have 110 locations nationwide that are open. They're the fastest growing beauty franchise in the US right now and predicted to have over 200 locations by next year. Brigham, welcome to the hashtag Clockedin podcast. And the first thought is, how has travel impacted your life? And in this podcast, guys, we're going to talk about travel. We're going to talk how Brigham opened these franchises. We're going to talk about how he's the fastest growing, and you'll have to listen to hear the rest of that. But Brigham, how has travel impacted your life?
Yeah, I think I have a unique story compared to most people. I dropped out of college when I was in my 20s. And I wanted to try like you ever have this like obsessive thought that just keeps coming to you and you're like it can't leave. Like that was
Yes.
like every waking moment I'd wake up and be like I gotta see the world. Like I'm just living in the United States. Like what is Germany like? What is Thailand like, you know? And so I bought a one-way ticket and I started traveling. And for the next 6 years I would live 6 to 8 months outside the US and I'd come back to the US for a little bit and then keep that up. And so I lived out of a suitcase for over the majority of my 20s, traveling the world. And I had some unique experiences from this. And I'll tell you a couple of things that like shaped my life from this. Number one is you get into a country and you have 3 months there because your visa is going to expire before you have
Yes.
to leave the country. And so I started thinking early on, I said, what is one thing I could accomplish here that if I did this, it would have a significant impact on my life. And I almost had I almost like had goals aligned to the location. So for example, I thought, if I could learn to dance, like that'd be really cool if I could be like a really good dancer. And so I was talking to one person on my travels and I was like, hey, you're a really good dancer. Like if you wanted to become as good as you are now, as fast as possible, what would you do? And he goes, I would find the best dancer I could, and I'd go take lessons from him. And so I Googled world champion salsa dancer. And then I moved to Barcelona and I started taking lessons in Barcelona from like the world champions. And it was like a 3 month stint. And in those 3 months, like I got so good at dancing compared to other times. Like I was dancing with this like this couple, and the guy would play the woman's part, which was like weird at first, but he'd be
Yeah.
like, no, change your hand a quarter of degree like this and put this much pressure. It was like these like little like micro nudges, and I'm like, whoa, that like changes everything, you know? And so I would do that for a lot of things. Like I learned Spanish going to Colombia. I asked my friends like, where's the best place to learn Spanish? Like if I want like a British accent in English, how do I find that in Spanish? And so they're like, go to Colombia.
Yeah.
So I bought a one-way ticket and I just spent 8 hours a day talking to people on the streets, obsessing over this one goal of learning Spanish for 3 months. Um, and so I started doing this, and over the collection of years, I started gaining like kind of like an Eagle Scout, gaining merit badges and certain like life skills that helped me become better. I learned how to code, I learned how to do video editing, I learned how to do SEO and online marketing, and I just became a much broader, more like holistic person during this time period.
I think that's incredible. Travel has been one of my favorite things. And I think the way you went about it was so good because we've had several guests come on and they talk about skill acquisition. And a lot of like the common day things that happen are people want to go get a promotion and keep getting promoted and they keep moving through, but they don't realize that they're gaining different skills. If you gain skills, those cannot be taken away from you. So, like
Yeah.
the skill of becoming a salsa dancer or the skill of becoming a marathon runner or any of these can never be taken from you. So I think that's absolutely incredible. And then to learn from the teachers themselves. Because this is applicable to anybody listening right now. If you want to gain a new skill, you should go to the professional and ask them how to do it. Like, I just got married
Yeah.
in November, and me
Congrats.
and my, well, now wife, we did dancing classes for 6 weeks, and it was just 1 hour a week, and we got exponentially better.
Yeah.
And like, I feel and it was 6 hours. But if we tried on our own, we wouldn't have even known what to do.
That's a
So
big
it,
thing.
yeah, by immersing
Yeah.
yourself, you learn so much quicker too.
Yeah. Yeah. I still have those principles today. It goes back to like minimalism. Like, if you go to the store and you just like buy a shirt, that shirt's kind of nice. But if I told you you can only own 3 shirts, like you would be really selective and like take a lot of time to figure out the quality and like figuring out exactly what you need, the color that matches everything else. And I think maybe that's the approach we need to take with goals in our time. It's better to have one pointed goal that for the next couple of months we can work on over having a bunch of things that just kind of happen little bit by little bit. Recently, I wanted to run a 6 minute mile. I had an 8 minute time. I'd get into the sevens, but I really wanted to get a 6 minute mile time. So I've been working on my VO2 max. I've been doing 4 minute sprints, and I finally got to a 6 minute mile a couple of weeks ago. So it's been
Oh,
really like
congratulate.
really feels like a yeah, it feels like a big accomplishment. I'm 37, so hitting a 6 minute mile at my age feels like really good.
Absolutely. And you start to realize that there's just so much opportunity. And what it comes down to is really figuring out what's best for us. You know what I mean? So whatever that goal is, you can get incremental success and it doesn't take a long time, like Brigham's saying. Like you can do a lot of these wherever you are. So why did you go for 6 to 8 months? Like, and then you just came back home. Like, how did the money situation work too? Because
Yeah,
everyone's probably wondering that.
yeah, and I was poor. Like this isn't like, Instagram life traveling. Like I had enough money in my bank account for a flight home in an emergency. And then I was just scrambling during the time to do that. So, I mean, I had some cool experiences. I was living on an island in Thailand and I got there's people came there and they needed like white people to be part of like an extras in this German movie. And so I got
Yeah.
picked up as an extra and I was like, this is kind of fun. Like, what else could I do with this? So I joined a modeling agency in Bangkok, and it was like for like foreigners to like be in this modeling agency.
Oh,
And they
wow.
said they said you're too fat, and so I was like, no, I'm gonna fix this. I go back to my island. There's no gyms. I just found a bunch of rocks, and for like 3 hours a day, I would just lift rocks in the air and swim and run, and like I just got into shape. I ate like no rice and no like fruit, and just ate meats and like really healthy stuff. And I lost like 8 pounds, and I was
Oh,
like,
wow.
went back to the agency and I was like, they're like, okay, let's go. And like I started doing that to make money. And then I also, when I was living on this island, I met somebody that did SEO. It's like optimizing Google. And so I was
Yes.
like, hey, like, how do you do this? And then I spent like all like weeks learning this stuff. And I ended up opening a online advertising company from doing that. And that's how I lived for the next couple of years traveling.
Did you have to even pay this guy, or did you just sit there and learn from it? Like, the reason I say this is because a lot of people are very intimidated to ask for help,
Yeah.
and a lot of people don't know the right way of asking for help.
And that's the other thing about traveling. When you're living on an island, there's nothing to do. It's not like you're like, hey, let's go to the beach. Like you live on a beach, right? And so
Yeah.
people are very willing to share information in the travel scene. They're very open to have those dialogues with you because they're outside of their regular routine. Back home, I have sports, I have friends, I have social lives. I've been on an island like I'm like, what day is it? Because there's no like action that tells you what day it is. Like on Sunday, you go to church, on Monday, you go to work. Like there's none of that. It's just like you can really like put your time into the one thing you want to focus on, which was really cool. And so no, I didn't have to pay him anything. Just ask him a bunch of questions.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And you don't realize the opportunity you get with this kind of stuff because there's so many people that are willing to help, especially like you said, they remove a lot of the tension and the
Yeah.
busyness. When you remove yourself from the thing, there's no friends, there's no input. Like you recreate each of your inputs each and every time, which I think is one of the most beneficial things. And like for me, I ended up traveling for 7 weeks this year and we were working while doing it, so it was a little bit different. But you constantly, every place you go, you just say hi. Like, what's the my favorite place? I don't have a favorite place. I don't have anything, and you're constantly in a learning mode, which I think is so beneficial.
I think the life lesson to take out of this, and it's not just about traveling, but it's what is that one thing you want to accomplish that would make incremental changes in your business, your life, your social settings, your fitness. What is that one thing that if I focused on for the next X amount of time and keep it short because our attention
Yeah.
spans are not years at a time, like 2 to 3 months is probably a good amount, that it would make an incremental change in my life. And so we talked about dancing, Spanish, learning different skills for like business. I still do that today. My business, we've got a lot of employees now. It's like, what is that one thing that will make magnitudes of change that I can accomplish this month? And then we really dissect into those things.
So instead of staying stuck in the day to day and staying in the rut, you're constantly looking to how to innovate and how to show up better for the people.
Yeah, and so we think about this. I have a team right now at this point. We
Of
think about
course.
cadences of meetings. Okay, so once a year we get together, we go to a cabin, and we figure out what we're going to do for the year. And then we have quarterly goals that kind of align with the big theme. Like this year's theme was retention and keeping clients in the business. And by the way, Hello Sugar is a hair removal company. We do Brazilian waxing, Brazilian sugaring, and laser hair removal. So 90% of our clients are females. It's the Brazilian area. If you don't know what that is, it's the bikini. That's
Yeah.
90% of what we do. And so we think about client retention this year, and then all of our quarterly goals align with something to do with retention. And then we have a monthly alignment where we think about what we're going to accomplish that month. And then every week we have a weekly sync for 30 minutes. We try to keep this really short where we say on track, off track, stuck, or accomplished. And then all of us list our goals and we all go down it together so we can start collaborating. And that keeps everybody on pace towards the ultimate goals that we want to accomplish for the year.
I love that. And the other bit major thing, that's literally what I do in my coaching business.
Mm,
Because you want to meet with people, you want to set the big objective, the big North Star, and then you break it down into weekly actionable steps that move you closer to that North Star. So
that's right.
even if you don't, maybe the goal is to, I don't know, it can be anything. It could be acquire more clients, it can be run a marathon, it can be anything you want it to be. And you basically just go down the list of like, did I work towards this goal? And it's super important because there's so many of us that are wasting our time each and every day, like on so many things. You might get an email and now you're stuck on that for 30 minutes, but you have to be able to push your goals forward because otherwise you're not going to accomplish the things you want to accomplish, and you're going to look at the end of the year and go, ah, I could have done better.
Bingo. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you even come up with Hello Sugar? Because it seems like an interesting just business in general.
Yeah, I mean, so whenever people always ask like, how'd you get into this business? And my like default joke answer is, I just love vaginas. I want to be I want to be around them more often. Um, but I was 26. I can't articulate this very like well about like at that time about what it was, but I knew as a general sense what I was looking for in a business. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and she says, oh man, I had to pay $20,000 in taxes. And keep in mind, I'm traveling and poor. So I'm not like, I haven't made it in life. So I was like, $20,000, like that's a lot of money to pay in taxes. Like, what do you do? She goes, oh, I'm a waxer. I do Brazilian waxing. And I was like, wait, like hairstyling or something? Like they don't make that much money, right? She goes, yeah, I made about 100K this year. And I'm like, holy crap. Like, okay, run those numbers by me. She goes, $45 for a Brazilian, 15 minutes. Like $180 an hour, you make more than a lawyer does. Like this is insane. Like, well,
Yeah, yeah,
how much is your product cost? And she goes, oh, it's like $2, $3 a service. I'm like, whoa, like what about like how do you get clients? She goes, I just ran a Groupon and they all came to me. I'm like, that's interesting. Like, how do you get them to come back? And she goes, well, hair grows back every month. So I just schedule them 4 weeks out and they keep coming because the hair grows back. I'm like, this is the coolest business I've ever heard of. Like, sounds amazing. I want to do it. And so I brought her down to Phoenix. I flew her down for one day, trained my first esthetician, got it up and running. And then from there, we were off to the races and we just built, built, built. I started with a one room suite. I didn't have a lot of money. So I put it in the back of a plastic surgeon's office. And that first year, I was working reception, had the plastic surgeon's office, which was already built out for me. So I spent like, no money on this. And then
yeah,
about 7 months in, I decided I'm ready for a big location. And I put my
yeah.
entire life savings into building this first location. I
Oh
had
wow.
$30,000 in the bank, $30,000 in like a line of credit. I got a $30,000 loan, and I had like maxing out my credit cards was like 40K on an Amex, right? So between all of that, I had like 110, 120, and it was like really scary for me. But I took that one room location and then moved it into a 4 room flagship anchored on a grocery store. And
Yeah,
I remember going there multiple times and thinking, this could be the end of me. Like I could be done if this doesn't
yeah,
work. Like I've lost everything. And I
yeah,
just took comfort in the fact that, I was scaling slowly. So I knew that if I could at least bring the clients I had over, I could pay my rents and I'm not gonna like be out of money. And that was enough for me to
yeah,
say, okay, this concept works. So when I started the franchise later on, I had the same concept. I was like starting a suite, which is a one room studio, which there's tons of these out there now. They're called like Salons by JC, Phoenix Salon
yeah.
Suites. These tiny studios, starting this like really tiny one, build your clientele, and when you're ready, then spend the money to move it to a flagship. It's a lot less scary that way. And you've proven the
Yeah.
business model out.
And it's got the reoccurring. So, and I completely agree with this. Whenever you're starting a business, try to start as small as possible.
Yeah.
Because if you start small, then you can actually test it and you don't feel that pressure of, I need to get 100 clients this month or we're not going to make rent, which can be a lot scary.
Yeah, asymmetric risk, right? Like if your overhead's less, then the fear of failing can be minimized.
And how has limiting your lifestyle, not limiting, but how has your lifestyle allowed you to take bigger risk in the business and not feel so, I have to
Right.
maintain this? Yeah.
Well, first off, I just a little bit about my personal life, so now Hello Sugar, we have 110 locations in the franchise. So if people are listening, franchises, you buy into a franchise, you own the business entirely, and we leverage the economies of scale of like all the tech, all the reception, all the AI, the apps and everything to help your business be way more successful than if you did it yourself. And so I don't own 110 locations. I own 15 in Phoenix, like market, and those
Yeah.
are mine. I, pay the same thing to the franchise to help it succeed, et cetera. Um, but I live a very minimal lifestyle. I mean, we do close to 10 million in revenue. I make millions, off the business, but I my whole like expenses is probably $6,000 a month. Like it's really negligible. Like my apartment's 2,300 dollars a month that I live in a two-bedroom apartment. I'm close to the airport. I value time and experiences way more than things. And so I remember like, early on, it was the same thing. Like I paid about $2,000 then for an apartment and I downsized. I was like, you know what? If I can't make my rent in my new place, I don't want to be stressed. Like
Yeah.
financially, I get stressed. Like if I have too much going on. So
Yeah.
I try to keep my expenses low on that. And that's just allowed me to pivot, like I don't have to go mow the lawn. I don't have to worry about like, fixing things in the house. I can focus on my business and building that instead of spending all this time doing all these other distractions.
Yeah, and I think that's so important because there's so many people that are so quick to go, I want to get the nice car, I want to get the boat, I want to get the house. And what you realize later on is that those are like you have to go to the mechanic 3 times a month. That's a
Yeah, those are
process.
anchors.
The
Yeah,
boat, yeah, and then you start to realize with the house, oh, I need a cleaning lady, I need a car, I need a this. Like you need so many things to maintain that it's like I can't give more to the business. Like I'm already
yeah,
pulled in 100 different directions. And like if you get a nice sized house, you become a house manager pretty quick.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
pretty quickly as a part-time job, unless you want to get a
yeah,
house manager. Like it's a process.
for
It
sure.
it definitely takes a lot of time. And I think it's important, like, especially with this, is how to live that optimal life. Because there's so many of us are looking for it. And we always think it's, let me get this job, or let me get this, or let me get that. So when you were building this, what was the long-term vision that you had? Was it freedom? Was it, what was it for you?
I had that already. So I already had a company. I was doing like digital ads, and that had become successful in its own right. Like I was making 150 a year, and for me that was like way more money than I
Yeah.
needed. So, I just like building things. I like watching things grow. I like tinkering. I like being part of that, process of like creating momentum. It's fun for me. And so I didn't have this like vision of like we're building a national company now, and that blows my mind that it's been so successful. Like never in a million years I ever managed like imagined that this would become what it has been. I thought, one, two locations and I'd be okay. But we just kept growing and grew faster than we could keep up with. And like, I opened that flagship, the flagship became profitable, and then I opened one more suite. The suite got to a point where I could do more revenue. So then I opened a flagship out of the suite and then did another suite. So every year I do one suite, one flagship. I did that for 5 years. And then I started franchising the business because my friends wanted to be part of this. And
Okay.
yeah, so initially it was just like, hey, my friends like saw a good business and wanted to be part of it. Like, here's a way to do that. I wanted to build this for them. And then the next year, the first year we grew like okay, but the next year, like other people saw how much money that my friends were making, and they're like, let's get involved as well. And we started building like that, and that's how it grew so fast.
And how does the economics behind it work for a franchisee? Like, and
Yeah.
what is even franchising in like how does that work?
Yeah, so think about this. So here's how this works. You pay a set amount of money to build it. And what's cool about franchising is it's a lot like a publicly traded company. Like everything's out in the open. Like the profits of all the franchisees, you can see the expenses of all the franchisees. We're held to that standard in these reports. So like it's a very like transparent business model. There's no like gotcha, you're in this business. It's like it really is there. And the way a franchise should work, now Hello Sugar or anything else, is that a franchise like us, we have 100 locations. If you had one location in your business, you couldn't invest a quarter million into AI technology, build an app out for $100,000, build all the reception tech, have a team that's dedicated just to marketing and communications and have photo shoots and like all the other stuff, right? So those
Yeah.
things collectively make you a much stronger business. So the calculus that you're making on a franchise company is, could the economies of scale of this company outweigh the 6% royalty that you pay to the franchisor to be part of the franchise? And we can make a very strong economic case that absolutely. And now you have a
Yeah.
business in a box that you don't have to, you don't have to like think about. You have something that like 100 locations have already worked. Now just take that, continue to make it profitable in your location and build it out. And you own the
Yeah.
business, but you're part of this club, if you will, that is all trying to help you succeed and help everybody else succeed. And so, sorry, just to answer your question, the economics, um, to build a suite, it's about 100K. To build a
Okay.
flagship, it can be 150 to 350K, depending on your locations. And all of this is in item 19. So, you'll actually look at the documents on this. And suites are making anywhere after a year, 60, 65,000 profit. Flagships are making between 100 to 250,000 profit with, a net margin of around 150 profit. And so, you can build a couple of these and replace your job. You're working maybe
Pretty
10 to
quickly.
15 hours a week, and now you have the liberty to travel and to do all these other things.
Yeah, absolutely. And people don't realize it that one of the biggest things that a lot of us miss that I found is you want like you want to build assets.
Yeah.
And then your assets are working for you. So this is all money working for you, yes, but it's also the assets are working for you. And once you're up and running, it flows. Like it
Yeah.
really does flow to a way where you're like, oh wow, I didn't expect this. So are a lot of people working the front desk at these franchise? Like, are these
Well,
people doing?
see, that goes back to like what makes us unique. If you think about a beauty business, front desk staff is 40% of your client, your employees. They're minimum wage employees. They add nothing to the value of the company. They're not producing revenue for you. They're checking people out, they're booking appointments, etc. We eliminated front desk altogether. So then we passed that savings on entirely to the franchisee. They're not having 40, they have 40% less staff than a normal place does. We do all the reception online. So if somebody calls in, they text in, they email, or whatever, we take care of that offshore, and in through AI. So like a lot of times people don't even know they're speaking to a bot, but it's like an actual bot answering their questions. We do
Yeah.
65% through a bot of all the
Wow.
tickets that come in. It's the highest in the industry in terms of AI. And so like, yeah, it's just the estheticians that are checking the clients out. And when they get in, they check in on an iPad. So it's a completely receptionless model.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So basically all the person would have to do is find the status, like find the girl who's gonna do the work.
Yeah, estheticians. Like
Esthetician. I didn't
it's a
know the
weird
exact
word.
word.
A lot of times get confused with anestheticians that numb you, but yeah, estheticians. Yeah, so a franchisee is finding three estheticians to work in their salon suite when they start. Um, and then they're managing their numbers and making sure that the relationship is good. So they're making sure they stay up on sales and that they're taking care of the clients, but they can't be in the room. So most franchisees are, working maybe 10 hours a week on the business. And the rest is handled through like automations and managers that we help put in place.
Wow. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's a cool
Interesting. I
concept.
mean, most people don't think about it this conventional way. And then
Mhm.
how have you been so ahead of the game on like AI and realizing these different opportunities? Because I feel like a lot of people are not seeing this as it is.
Yeah, I think we're starting to. Most people are, but I think we're ahead of the curve. When we started the franchise, I spent a year prior to starting the franchise building reception. So
Oh,
I'm
wow.
intimate in the reception process. I knew that if we're going to scale to 1,000 locations, I had to build something now that could handle 1,000 because it's infinitely more complex to switch afterwards. So I spent a year prior to franchising building that out. So reception was a really important part of this equation. Initially, we had macros, which are like texts that come in. Then we took the text and automated with a bot, but it wasn't like sentient. And
Yeah.
then we built a large language like learning model, an LLM, and we took that model and trained an AI on it to respond to questions. And once we felt on each of those intents, like booking, rescheduling, I'm on my
Yeah.
period, once we felt that those were confident enough to answer, then we rolled out each of those individual intents to the public until we got to the point now where we're at 65% automation.
Wow. And you start
Yeah.
getting the results back, and then if there's issues, you update and constantly iterating on it.
Yeah, we had the choice between doing an app and running AI. We couldn't do both. We didn't have the money for both. So we chose to do AI first. And that was like made a world of difference because then we had a lot more money to be able to do an app. So we have
Yeah.
a really good app now.
That's awesome. That's incredible. And what prompted the franchise? Because I know you were in BYU. Like what prompted that?
Yeah, so I was teaching a class called How to Start a Small Business for $3,000 or less because I started mine for $3,000. Um, and so I love my calling in life is teaching people how to start businesses. Like I love it more than anything else. And
Yeah.
so marrying the class with like my own business sounded really cool. So that's why I
Yeah.
started the franchise. And then my buddies wanted to do it. So my buddies were like, yeah, like how can I get involved in this? Can we become like partners? I'm like, huh, like maybe this is a way to how help you with your business, but not actually be involved in the same level to your business. You're still managing and owning and taking all the upside from it.
Yeah. And what did you see as like the original concept? Like were the students interested? Was this a thing that
I
a lot of people were
I
eager about?
felt, yeah, like ethically, I didn't feel right talking to my students about it
Yeah.
because, yeah, so so I didn't really talk to the students about the franchise, but I shared tons of case studies during class about Hello Sugar.
Yeah.
But then once they heard that I was doing a franchise, because I'm pretty close to a lot of my students, it got out. Like there's like tons of students from my former classes that now own franchises. I mean, there's an
Oh
entrepreneurship
wow.
department, so like they were all about like starting stuff like that. So yeah, like it did eventually work out that that's the way it went.
And what prompted you to teach the class? Like was this one of your
Um,
learning goals? Like
no, I like, I was traveling a lot. So I had a kind of a cool lifestyle, like I'm always in a new country, not in a new place. And when I was home, people would be like, "Hey, can I take you to lunch and kind of hear your story?" And so I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And eventually I was like getting asked that like all the time. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to build a class and teach it out of my house. So I had people come to my house
oh
and I was
really?
teaching them how to start a business, using like leveraging like online advertising to start that business. And so it turned out to be this like at-home class. And then I went up to BYU and I was like, hey, how can I get involved? I want to help out. And they're like, hey, teach this like lecture. Like it's a 1 hour lecture class. I taught the class. The students loved it. And then I got asked to like teach my at-home class at BYU. So it was a really unique, like I wasn't expecting this at all, but it was like
Yeah.
so fun. So I'd fly up to Utah, I'd teach for a day. I lectured 7 hours in a day for one day, and then I would ski the next day. And so I did that for 3 years straight. And the fall time, I would just like find some cool activity for the next day because I couldn't ski. But yeah, it was so fun doing that.
Yeah. And it was like your little reward to yourself is the outdoors and just experiencing whatever it
Yeah, I
is.
love Utah. Utah's a blast.
Utah is beautiful. We ended
Yeah.
up doing 3 weeks there in 2020 while we were traveling. And you just start to realize that there's so many different ways of life. Like there's so many different ways you can live. There's so many different things you can do.
Yeah.
So for you, is there any regrets you have at this moment? Because I feel like with someone going an unconventional path, it's like, is there anything different they would have done? Like,
I try not to live on like regrets and stuff
of course.
in that sense. I think we get into this cycle of like just beating ourselves down with those kind of things. I definitely have learning experiences from my past that I want to apply to like the future.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know how much I can say on air, but I'll just give kind of like I had a I had a partner, we'll call it that, who I gave equity to in the initial concept of like the Hello Sugar concept.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know how much I can actually say on air.
No,
Just
I got
basically,
you. It's all good.
but
No,
let,
I
let me just
understand.
let me
Yeah.
let me let me just say this broader, and this is something I learned from this experience.
Yeah.
Um, we had a clause in there, an ethics clause in the contract that said if there is any kind of unethical behavior, basically you'll get an appraisal of the business and buy the other person out.
But it was very
So,
vague.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so, I've learned that that's not the way you should do contracts. I've learned to put a lot of time and effort into figuring out how to build contracts in a way that are like fair. Like if somebody were to do something unethical in the business, you don't want to pay them like their equity.
They shouldn't get a bonus for getting in trouble. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so there's, stuff like that, or like How do you control majority share in the decision-making process to make sure that your business is preserved long term? How do you align incentives? How do you align incentives for your employees and for your partners to make sure that they're like thinking like owners and not just like employees in
Yeah.
the business itself? And how do you take that back if they're not acting, because you're placing a bet on that person? You don't want to give up equity to somebody if they're not going to perform the way they say they are. So making sure that's
Yeah.
done over time and not like right away. Like, so stuff like that I've learned a lot about over the years.
And then for you, was there anything, because I find it very interesting, and obviously you had it was a different time, with the social media going on and the constant comparison. But how do you not? It doesn't seem like you compare yourself to others because you live your own life, and I just know a lot of people struggle with the whole comparison thing. So how do you think about that?
Yeah. That is a great question. Man, that's such a good question. I don't spend a lot of time on social media looking at like other people's stuff. Like I'll post on social media and then I just get off. So like I'm not really very active on the social channels, with the exception of just like posting to keep connections with people that, I care about. In terms of like the comparison thing, I was thinking about this the other day. Like I play a lot of soccer. I love soccer, and I'm like, I'll never be that guy in soccer. Like that like number one player that like the Messis of like, some people
Yeah,
just have that gift. And I just remind myself in those situations, like, what are my gifts? Like, what is my messy scenario of what I'm really good at and can be proud about? And those help me think, you know what? Like, no one's going to be good at everything. And if you comparison is the killer of joy. So if I
yes,
start comparing myself to other people and like everything, then I just naturally fall into this like unhappy state, right? So I don't know. At some point, you just train your mind to say like that's not where we play. You know what you're good at, be proud for the things you're good at, and celebrate other people's success in those other categories.
100%. And I think one of the things that I focus on or that I'm interested in is more of moving to gratitude. Like whenever people get
Mm.
upset or whenever people get angry or whenever it's like, what are you grateful for? And you're like, oh, I don't want to answer that. And it's like, oh no, you have so much to be happy for, and you're so like you've created so much. And I find that helps people and that helps myself a lot because when you can get overwhelmed and you can get bogged down and there's always issues going on. And it's like, another really interesting one was I was having a coaching call with his potential client, and he was basically like, "Yeah, you ever have a bad week?" And I'm like, "Not really, man." And I'm like, he's like, "I'm like, what's your definition of a bad day?" And he's like, "I don't have one." And I'm like, "Okay." Like, and I realized that you need definitions for these things. So, like, a
Mhm.
definition for a bad day to make it not a bad day, like a definition of a bad day would be someone close to you passes away. Okay. At least you qualify what a bad day is. And then can we qualify what a good day is? And it's like waking up. Okay, fantastic. So now we have good days or bad days. Not, hey, I feel like I'm in a mood. And I realize that definitions help so much for us to be more successful because I think that really brings us down. So for you, is there anything that you've done that's really
Yeah.
helped you mindset wise? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna answer that question, but just one thought I had when you're talking about this. Andrew Carnegie was considered one of the richest men of the 1900s. He was a big influencer in the steel industry and the railroads and like building,
Yeah.
the back ends. He said he got asked in an interview. Someone was like, "You're the richest man in the world right now. How much, how much is enough? How much is enough money for you?" And he said, "Just a little bit more." Like you're never satisfied. And I find that a little bit sad, you know? Like how do we become satisfied with what we have? But to answer your question, because I think you're asking more about like the happiness side of things.
Of
Uh,
course.
I like to think of my life in silos.
Okay.
A silo, when you think of a farm, a silo is where you put the grain. The grain is stored for a later date. And so if you think you have like, what are your silos in life? Like I have a silo for my relationships, a silo for spirituality, a silo for fitness, and a silo for work. And I can use any of those silos to activate happiness, right? Like
Yes.
if I'm having a bad day at work, I can go have a really good relationship with my wife and increase my happiness. Or I could go score a goal and feel really good about myself to mitigate some of the stress of the work side because work. A lot of entrepreneurs like work is their silo of happiness,
Yes.
and work is very based on externalities. Like no one expected COVID. but COVID could kill that silo for a long time, right? And so we need other places to put our happiness to be able to become resilient to those bad
Yes.
experiences.
And I think that comes down to having different things that, but the more diverse we are, the more opportunities we have for happiness too.
Yeah,
And it's like the more, and even it doesn't even have to be like outside. Like you could be in work, but you have to measure. The more things you measure, the more happiness you can get. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So because we can be so hard on ourselves sometimes. So if you're like really structured on something and we only look at sales numbers, but you don't look at all the new franchises that developed, and you're like, oh, like I guess that's pretty good, but it didn't beat the sales number. Like, you know what I mean? It kind of goes back and forth, and it's starting to realize like what actually makes us happy and like where can we find this? Because no matter where we are, like one of the ones I use a lot too is the frame of like look back at yourself 10 years ago and would you be like pumped about where you're at? And a majority of the time people are like, yes, yes, of course. Then why don't we let ourselves be pumped right now?
So true. So true. I think sometimes we get to it and like whatever we get to doesn't feel different. Like when we passed
Yeah.
100 locations, I was like happy for like a minute.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, let's keep going. Um, but like I think spending some time to like have a dinner or have some like time to celebrate like those really high achievements that we were working for so long at, like, no, take some time to celebrate. I was talking to an owner that just passed $20,000 in profit a month. And I was like, dude, this is like incredible. Like, look at what you've accomplished. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, no, like let's celebrate this. This is really cool.
100%. And being present with that and
Yeah.
not just being like, what's next? Because
Yeah.
when you constantly go to that what's next, you never give yourself the freedom to be happy and freedom to enjoy and freedom to be like, whoa, we
Bingo.
really did this. And I
Yeah.
find, and you have to let yourself do that all along the path. And that's from the guy who did 20,000 a month, that's from the 1,000 a month to the 5,000 to the 10,000 to the 15. Like it's all along the journey because there's so many times where you're going to have up days or bad days or whatever it is, but you have to realize you're going in the path that you want to go on, and this is an exciting journey.
I totally agree.
Yeah,
100% agree.
because there's so much where it's just we just don't give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. We're like, we're not good, we're not this, we're not that, and it's like, no, you just had an amazing trip, or you just had an amazing like year, or you just had an amazing month, or whatever it is, and you
Yeah.
have to give yourself that grace, or even if it's a bad month, still giving yourself that grace of like, hey, if we look at the bigger picture, I'm doing pretty well. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely. It happens so often. So for you, how do you look at life nowadays? Like, do you still travel? Is travel done with? Are you only on Hello Sugar? Like, how do you think about juggling all that?
Yeah, traveling is a very big part of my life, so I hope that never goes away. I still travel 3 to 5 months a year on a regular basis. So in 2020, I got married in 2020, and our goal was to travel all 7 continents in 2020. But COVID hit like literally 4 days after we got married. So we got married on
Oh my
Saturday.
God.
Thursday, the country got shut down. So you can imagine like how crazy that was. And so as soon as like countries started opening, July 15th, the first country to open was Tahiti, French Polynesia. So
Yeah.
we're like, all right, we're going. And we started our world tour. And we did that year, we hit 4 continents in 2020.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and during this, and it was crazy because we would be the only tourist somewhere in the world.
Yes.
It was like it was so crazy. And during this time, like my wife was like not working. And so I would be like on calls and like I'd be like, hey honey, like I know we're like at this cool waterfall. I gotta go take this call, or
Yeah.
like, and it was a little bit hard for her to adjust to that. And it was hard for me to see that as well. And so I started something that I haven't stopped doing, and it's been one of the best things for my business. I use Calendly, Tidycal is another one, but basically where you can go schedule appointments with people and it has the Zoom link automatically sent to them. And then what I do is I put a Calendly link for Mondays and Wednesdays, and I stack all my meetings on 2 days a week. And so Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday are completely open. And when I was traveling, like those 2 days, I'm in a hotel. It's a nice hotel. You know that you got to go do whatever you want to do. But those 2 days, like I'm working from like the earliest of mornings until as late as possible doing all my meetings. And in that way, I think we have like a manager brain and we have like a building brain, like a development brain, and so like the manager brain doesn't work at the same, like call it alpha waves as like the development brain. The development brain needs like long periods uninterrupted to build things. And the manager
Yes.
brain needs to talk to a lot of people. And I
Yeah.
think it's a bad idea for people to combine days where the manager brain and the developer brain has to work. And so that's been a big thing now, even today. And it's allowed me to travel. It's allowed me to have like cool experiences and flexibility in my schedule. Is I have a day where like today, Wednesday, from 8 a.m. until as late as humanly possible, I'm doing meetings. And tomorrow I
Yes.
have zero meetings planned. And I'm going to be able to work on the things that I need to accomplish for the week.
I love that because it gets you thinking a little bit differently and you start to
Mhm.
realize that like Alex Hormozy talked about it where he's like, yeah, I try to go super uninterrupted and then I'll have meetings starting at the bottom of the day and build them up. But when you really think about it, like how many meetings are that important? One, and then two, what is the point of all these meetings? And you start to realize, hey, if I can just put them in the container of where I own them, then we'll be in a much better place and you don't have to then you can really think clearly and allow you to open up that travel schedule which I really love and I think the best part is because you put yourself through that it allows you to open up these opportunities so I think whenever you put a lot of constraints on yourself it causes innovation and most people are so like no I can't do that no you cause the constraint and then you open up innovation so like when we were traveling around for 7 weeks like originally I would use my phone to like bill people and I couldn't bill anyone because the Square doesn't work on the phone. But like
Yeah.
once I went on the computer, I auto charged and I would do it. You have workarounds, you figure it out and you
Yeah.
make stuff work. And you like when you put it there, you're not gonna sit there and be like, I'm not collecting like you make things work and you allow yourself to have these opportunities to really live that life. And I love that. Is there any other tips or tricks that you have that allow because I sit here and I'm like, it seems like you probably have a pretty optimized life for like experiential. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, like I have an assistant, we'll call
of
it that.
course.
It's just a girl in the Philippines. You can find somebody for like $4 an hour. So don't think this is like some glorified like, personal assistant that this is like really expensive. But she has my entire set of passwords and credit cards associated with travel. And I just text her and I'm like, "Hey, I want to go here." And she knows what I want. She knows the car I want, she knows the hotels I want to stay at, and she knows my flights and I'll just screenshot the flight I want, and she'll book the hotels and everything else. So she handles my entire travel schedule, which is really nice. It took a little bit to set that up, but that's like really made traveling easy. The second thing, the unintended consequence of traveling that's worth talking about is that when you leave, people stop relying on you to figure out their job. And I don't know why that is. I mean, people are like, "Oh, Brigham's in Japan. Like, I don't want to bother him while he's on vacation." Well, I'm not on vacation. Like, I'm still working. If I was on vacation 5 months a year, this company wouldn't work. But people think twice before they reach out about something. And somehow your company just starts to learn how to be self-sufficient. And if you start traveling, you're going to find gaps in your company where you're like, "Oh crap, like this can't work without me. How do I make it work without me so I can go do these X, Y, and Z things that I like to do, like travel?" And you start to make your company more automated, which makes the company better 100%.
I love that. And
Yeah.
do you adjust? Because I want everyone to realize this. Like, do you adjust? Like when you say those meetings for Monday and Wednesday, and you're in Japan. Like obviously Japan's time is completely different. Are you
Yeah.
working throughout Japan's night, or are you working through Japan's day? Because I you told me this previously, and I think this is
Yeah.
important for everyone to realize.
Yeah. Like, look, like if I can, I'll schedule the meetings, my nighttime, their morning time. So I'm not like 3 a.m. because I'm just not going to be functional. But for the most part, I'm working US time because I can't expect my team to like change their lifestyle because I'm in Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to realize that there are sacrifices on both sides of it. It's not that you get to control everything. Sometimes you have to stay up later, you have to do different things because
Yeah.
everyone wants to be like, "Oh, it's so glamorous." Like you just did this and it's like, "No, I the extra 4 hours I had today, I went on a little adventure instead of sitting at home and watching TV." Like,
Most people aren't cut out to travel. This is what I've
yeah.
learned. Like most people, it's very hard to live in a different bed, in a different lifestyle, a different routine. There's going to be things that are going to go completely wrong. And unless you have like a go with the flow mentality, traveling will stress a lot of people out. And I'm not talking about going on vacation for a week. I'm talking like let's go for a couple months somewhere. Like that's very stressful for people that are getting outside of their comfort zone to try something new like that.
Yeah. So what would you recommend if someone was thinking about it or considering it? Like how would
Yeah, pick an easy country to
what's an
do it in.
easy country?
Thailand's a phenomenally easy country to travel in. Indonesia's pretty easy to travel in. Um, Countries that are cheap that have like great experiences and speak English. So yeah, like there's some good ones out there. Colombia is a fun one to travel in. Um, I would just pick areas that like you could live for a while and like what I would do is like I would pick a place and during the week I would stay there and the weekends I would take, weekend trips to all the different destinations around that area.
Okay, I like that. No, the reason I'm curious is because like when I was doing it last earlier this year, we did 7 weeks, and the strategy was, I mean, and this was a little aggressive, but it was like Monday through Thursday, stay in the same location.
Yeah.
Then like Friday, we would go somewhere, Saturday, Sunday, and then try to get back to somewhere else by like Monday, and
Yep.
like have your day set up, like
It's
try to
exactly
and
the
try to
same.
stay in the same country, because otherwise you're done for. If you're
Yeah.
trying to catch planes and do three places in one week, it
Exhausting.
becomes, yeah, it's too much, too much.
It's
We did that
exhausting.
one
Yeah.
time during the trip, and it was like we were both looking at each other like, "Oh my God, this is awful." Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not always glamorous. It's not always glamorous. But Brigham, this has been amazing. Where can people learn about HelloFresh and or if they're or sorry, Hello Sugar, and if they're considering franchising or interested in that process, what does that look like?
Yeah, Hello Sugar, you can just Google Hello Sugar franchise and come to our website, hellosugar.salon. You can see all the information about the economics, if this is be good for your business or your area. The 30-second pitch is if you want something that you can continue doing your current full-time job that has 100+ locations, it's got a proven strategy of success, it'll automate a lot of this process for you. And you don't have to be very beauty minded. I mean, we're a tech company that does waxing. Then check out Hello Sugar franchise and learn more about us. We'll schedule a meeting and just talk through it. There's zero pressure. It's not a sales call in any way. Just learn about it. And if it's something that's a good fit, then welcome to the team. Hello Sugar is a national brand now, so we got locations everywhere.
Congratulations on all the success.
Thanks, Jordan.